And in fact, Murillo Velarde will put on his maps in Spanish, aquí estuvo San Francisco Javier. Here, St. Francis Xavier was here. Okay. Again, the symbol there, the same cartouche, the same medallion. And so, if you look at the map, maps do not only teach us where we are and where we want to go, but if you look at the map, you can actually tell the story of your life. You can say, this is where I was born, this is where I went to school, this is where I fell in love. So, a map tells your story. There's the narrative. Maps therefore teach us about our history. They teach us about our identity. And of course, maps give us a certain sense of self-esteem, especially if you see your country slowly emerging on the map. That's why in 1991, my friends from Europe signaled to me that the 1734 Murillo Velarde map was being auctioned in Frankfurt, okay, 1991. And it was, the starting bid was something like 10,000 German francs, something like 300,000 pesos at the time. And I was dean then of Ateneo, and I tried to bring 10 Ateneans at least to contribute money so that we could bring it back for self-esteem, you know. But unfortunately, a historian, a Jesuit no less, shut the project because he said, what was I trying to do at the time when Pinatubo was exploding? He said, why was I concerned in getting a map so expensive when things were exploding? I'd like to point out that that argument is like the Judas argument. You know, it's like people who say, why are you buying this? Why doesn't the Vatican sell all its treasures and give it to the poor? Well, things do not work out that well. That clearly, things are more complicated, you know. Anyway, but that same map which was auctioned there is the map that was bought here in the Philippines. So, had I $500,000 pesos, I would be a millionaire now. So a multi-millionaire. So, this is a very important map of the Philippines. This is an Italian map because it is the first map where the word Filipina, okay, which was given by Luis Lopez de Villalobos in 1543, but the map is actually 1554. It was actually given to Leyte or Samar. You might be disoriented because the Philippines is upside down. This is Cebu, that's Papuas, this is Negros, Vendanao. Okay, so it's going down, no? Instead of going up. And so this is what I meant by if you are a map collector, you're interested in how the Philippines begins to appear on the map. It appears first as Puluan. Puluan is Palawan. There's a small island which is called Puluan, which is the Malayan word for island. So it begins, the Philippines is mapped from south, and it only appears, the first time it appears, it's Filipina because it's actually Filipina. It should be Filipina because it's after Felipe II. And but I think this is it's like the birth certificate of the Philippines. Okay, very important map. But this is the map of 1598 by a person called Petrus Carius, and you notice again, it's the first time the Philippines appears printed fully. 1598, separately printed, okay, well, there's a little tidbit here. somebody wrote, this is the Che Lavit map, because it says that Petrus Carolus Che Lavit, which is wrong, because maybe the one who wrote it did not study Latin. Che Lavit means to engrave, so but that's trivia. And so why do antique maps, or why do maps, especially antique maps, captivate us? Precisely because I said they are instruments of power, they are icons of beauty, especially the antique maps, and if we know how to interpret them, they are vessels of beauty, they are sources of knowledge. Like this famous map, which was printed in Florence by an Englishman. It took 40 years to make, and the engraver took 12 years to print it, and he used 2,000 pounds of copper. Quite amazing. And it has a Baroque, you know, the maps also have this Baroque calligraphy because they're influenced by, of course, artists like Dürer, Albrecht Dürer. But maps are not only physical objects of beauty, knowledge, and power. Maybe I should have told you at the beginning, what are the basic features of a map? These are the basic features of a map. What is a map? The simplest definition of a map would be that it is the visual rendering, it's the graphic rendering of a real or imagined place or space. I think that's the most, you have books about the definitions of maps, but that's the shortest definition we can reduce it to. And a map has a scale. Usually you cannot have a map as big as the territory. That was the dream of Jorge Luis Borges, but that would be absurd to have a map as big as the landscape. Okay? And therefore, since the size is very small, you have to select. It's very selective. And therefore, if you select, you will have to ignore other details. And therefore, in a map, if it does not appear on the map, usually it will disappear. There are silences in maps. And so, a map therefore reveals, but at the same time that it reveals, it also conceals. Okay, so there is this, and therefore here we're talking about maps are not fully objective. They are subjective renditions. In other words, it depends who is making the map. Whose map is it? Who ordered it? That's why usually the prince ordered the map because he wanted to show, look, I have the map, I own the place. Right? This is part of me. And so the maps, therefore, it's the visible which shows us what is invisible. Because this is very important to notice. The invisible is in the visible. I repeat. What is invisible is in the visible. Okay. Behind the visible, there is the invisible. Like a painting, you only see the painting when you go beyond the visible. It's when you see what cannot be seen by the eye that you actually see the painting, because it's the meaning. So if you're just seeing colors, lines, shapes, you have not actually seen what the painting is. That's why it's very important to appreciate the invisible in the visible. That's why the little prince said, the essential is invisible to the eyes. Okay, one can only